right. Today we have Dr. Jason Helfrich on the show. Welcome to the show, Doc.
Thanks for having me. Always good to see you, Eric. And
Likewise.
glad to be part of this podcast and everything it stands for.
Perfect. Today, I'm just going to get into a few details about your journey into entrepreneurship and where you got to make the money that you did and how you gained that success. And so, just as a brief intro, you and I know each other through my father. You're a chiropractor yourself, as is my father. And so I guess I want to start with, how'd you get into chiropractic? It's a unique profession, and everyone has a fun story to tell.
Yeah, you know it is. It's such an amazing profession too. And everyone always says that they didn't find chiropractic found them. I think I'm a good example of that. I married into it essentially. And so my wife, Vanessa, who's also a chiropractor, as you know, her father is a very prominent chiropractor in the world of the education world of chiropractic. Practice management, different things like that, kind of evolved into the education side. So he had always been a chiropractor, and I knew that dating Vanessa even way before we were married. And Vanessa's mom is a chiropractor. Vanessa's grandfather's a chiropractor. So it's very deep in their family roots. Mine, not at all. I had no idea what it really was until I was introduced to Vanessa and the entire concept. But you know, I remember at one point we were restaurateurs. And so we went to school, business, opened a restaurant, very young. We had a big staff of 60 and we were in downtown Denver and owned a restaurant and we're humming along, but one day determined we don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work till 2 or 3 in the morning.
Nights and weekends.
Yeah, I love restaurants and I love what it represents. And I think every human should have to work in a restaurant because, man, it teaches you so much about everything business-wise. But we knew we didn't want to do it forever. And so I remember the conversation. We were building a house in Parker, Colorado, and Vanessa and I said to Vanessa, and I said, you should consider going to chiropractic school. Like, your parents do great. What a great life they have. They love what they do. I can go put you through school and I'll go run a restaurant out there in Davenport, Iowa, and do whatever it takes to do that. We thought about it, sold the restaurant, sold the house before we even moved in. Moved out there. I fell in love with the philosophy. 4 months later, I was like, I'm absolutely going to chiropractic school as well. So I'd been around it. I'd been adjusted by it. I believed in it to the core, but at the same time, I'd never pictured myself as a chiropractor until one of those aha moments of like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I love it. And of course, now I can't imagine anything else. It's become such part of my life, but that was kind of how I got involved in the profession.
Gotcha. So I didn't know that about you, that you were a restaurateur before you went to chiropractic school. So I also worked in restaurants when I was young, from 15 to 20. And I agree, it should be a prerequisite. If I were to turn into a politician, what I would say is a requirement for young kids is either you do some level of service. You do either, military service, you do restaurant service, you do care for the elderly, something like that. I think our world and our nation would be served much better if people had to go through that, because it teaches you so much about human beings and taking care of them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm with you 100% there. But it takes a special kind of person to get into a restaurant business that has a 90% failure rate. So expand on that a little bit. What type of restaurant was it?
Yeah, well, the particular one we opened was called The Cork. It was wine and kind of an American bistro, if you will. The bar side took off. So, we were there till serving martinis and wine till 2 a.m. and clean up and then home at 3. And, we're raising a young family. And it became evident of like, this is what was a dream lifestyle maybe when I was 22. As I got into my late 20s, it was like, I don't want to do this forever. Like I don't want to sleep till 10 a.m. every morning because I go to bed at 4, things like that. It wasn't what we wanted to do, but I love restaurants. To this day, I still love them. I fight every impulse to not open one because I know now I could do it so well. I think it's just a fun business. It was kind of one of those things in college when I was doing real estate. I got a bartending job to kind of pay the bills while I was going through it. And then it's, hey, would you mind running the bar while you're, I'm like, that's fine. I'll do inventory and stuff like that. And then I'm a general manager, and then I'm a regional manager, and then I own my own place. And so another one of those things that I think when you're successful at something because you love it, you naturally just go through the progression. I love every moment. What we learned opening that restaurant, and we only owned it for a year before we sold it. Um, I learned more in business world in that year of owning a restaurant than I did in previous college and anything before that.
Yeah.
It gives you a ton for sure.
Trial by fire. I love it.
Yep.
So, taking a step backwards a little bit, when you were growing up, were your parents entrepreneurial? Is that the seed that was planted to start these types of businesses, or how were you raised?
Yeah,
By
not really. Lower middle class, or maybe just dead right in the middle class. My dad's very hardworking, construction. Was a general contractor, and both for commercial and for. I knew one thing: I didn't want to be a contractor because I saw him go through it, and he just seemed miserable at times going through and dealing with everything he wanted to. So, in some cases, you're an entrepreneur a little bit in the contracting business because I mean you're going out hustling for business and stuff, but he ended up working for a big corporation that did national chains across the country because he liked the safety and stability and what that provided for him and the family and things. So my mom raised the kids, worked at home, had a couple jobs here or there, but they weren't real heavy into entrepreneurialism. I don't know. I kind of caught the bug early, and whether I was mowing lawns or planting trees or whatever I was doing. I'm one of I started working at the age of 14. Yeah, I sound like a 100-year-old grandpa telling a story, but I mean, that's how it was, so I just always had to work. My parents never really said, here's a bunch of money. It was, if you want great football cleats, then go make some money and go buy them, and if you go there, then go buy it. So no, not really a big time entrepreneurial upbringing. And that kind of, I don't know where it came from, to be honest with you, but man, it's strong in me and I still love it to this day.
Yeah, so I can relate to that. My dad was an entrepreneur, as you probably know, and so I got to see it, but that didn't really, if anything, I think it would have pushed me away from it because I saw the struggles he dealt with early on. But I always had that itch, just like you, and that's why I think entrepreneurship is more of an innate attribute of somebody rather than something that's learned. And there's different schools of thought. But for me, I think in my high school yearbook, I was voted the most likely to be a millionaire by 30 or something because I always wanted to work and I always wanted to make money so I can buy things that I wanted. So similar to you, I was working as early as I legally could. In Arizona, it was 15. The only place that would hire us was the movie theater. So I worked at the Harkins movie theater down the road, and I did that until I hated it, and they wanted me to work on Christmas and the Super Bowl, all those sorts of things. And then I got into restaurants, and you catch the bug pretty early, as you described. So that's very interesting that you had a similar experience to me, and I think that's more and more common than people think.
Well, being an entrepreneur, I think, I mean, a lot of people, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And for a while, it kind of meant you were unemployed. Then it had this huge heyday of like, oh man, you're an entrepreneur. And it was a super sexy term. And then until some people saw like, man, that's actually hard as hell. But of course it provides like, I do better when I control my own destiny. And so I love the ability. If I go broke, that's my fault. Right. So that's me that did that. If I make a ton of money, that's me. Like I put the work in, and of course there's a team and all kinds of stuff that make it much more complex than I said. But at the end of it is just you. It's you facing the challenges, solving problems that other people can't, and having the tenacity to get through times that others can't. And if you do that, and not many can, then you can call yourself an entrepreneur and you earn the stripes officially, and hopefully you make a great living doing what you love.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I know you have kids of your own. I have two, almost three, very young kids. So I'm in the thick of early stages and thinking about their future and my future alongside it. Since we've now kind of agreed that entrepreneurship is an innate attribute, are you talking to your kids about business? How has their upbringing been under your, light of running businesses and having a level of success? One thing that I get concerned about is having entitled kids, because I know that becomes more likely when you have the means and the ability to buy them whatever they want. It takes good parenting to avoid that. So that's been very much on my mind in the recent years. So how have you dealt with that in your own family?
Yeah, I mean, I think that You're right. Raising kids, one of my biggest fears was raising kids that didn't want to work like I worked, right? Because I have a lot more, and I have a lot more that I can give my kids than my parents did when I grew up. And I had a great upbringing, so it wasn't a sad, it was wonderful. They just drove me to work. And so it's a fine line of instilling that work ethic in your kids. Because I think one of the weakest things we're dealing with right now is a poor work ethic and people coming out and they just don't know what it means to go out and earn it and work it and do what you need to do. So, I think that my kids saw Vanessa and I talk about work all the time because we love it, right? We're both chiropractors. I love the profession. I love the philosophy of the profession. I love the business of the profession. And so, when we're having wine at night and hanging out and talking, we're talking about work because that's what we do. It's what we've done our whole life. We're both partners. And so we're always talking about that. They see the entrepreneurial side of it, but I think to some extent, like I think a lot of kids see the bad side of it. I think my kids really saw the good side of it. And I did a good job of saying, it's tough. Like this is a tough day or, whatever. But that being said, that's just like one step closer to a breakthrough or man, we see this opportunity. We're just close. We're trying to solve this problem and all the things that entrepreneurs do. So I think they all caught the bug, to be honest. I'll know for sure soon. I mean, one's still an undergrad and one is running our nutritional company right now. And one's getting ready to graduate from chiropractic school in a few months. So I am interested to see what path they all take. I know Tyler, who's my oldest, will be a chiropractor and can't wait to join the business. And he's entrepreneur to the core. So yeah, I think that we've done a pretty good job of instilling the values of work inside them, but also showing them what's possible. And, for selfish reasons, I like to take my kids on trips to Europe or, we went to Greece last summer and we're going to, for me, not for necessarily for them, but I wanted to tour Greece with my kids. Why I still do that. So, I think I err on the side of putting that seed in of like, man, that was cool as hell. I want to make money so I can do stuff like that with my family and my kids, as opposed to like, you get everything you want, you can just do it. They're not going without me. I'll tell you that much, but like, I'm there. I'll pay for a meal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in my experience, again, being early into it, I see parents oftentimes using their kids as excuses, almost like, yeah, I want them to experience this culture. And I'm like, come on, just be real. This is for you. You want to go and you want to see it with your kids, which is fine. But
we're best of friends. So I mean, like when you're raising your kids, there's all kinds of different, you can be friends sometimes and not friends other times. But they're at the age now where like, there's no one I'd rather hang out with. I mean, so I can't wait to play golf with them or have them come over and, whether it's on a Sunday night, just regular dinner, or we're going on a trip. Like, so we have a great time together and we have a lot in common. So, I mean, I'm very blessed to have a family that's super tight and shares a lot of the same values.
And your oldest, who's in chiropractic college, has he always shown that desire to become a chiropractor, or was that kind of instilled?
Yeah. I mean, I think since I remember, he was like, I'm going to be a chiropractor. It was just decided. And, when they're 10, you're like, oh yeah, great. We'll see, whatever. But, he then went off to USD in San Diego and then right off to Life College in Atlanta. And there was never a question. So, and he goes to Peak now in Tallahassee, Florida at one of our offices. And then he'll be joining us out in Scottsdale. So
awesome. So zoom back into 100% chiropractic. That's your baby. And that's what you and Dr. Vanessa started right out of school, correct? Okay. So obviously you had been a business owner before that. So it seems obvious that the plan was to continue being a business owner of some sort. What was the vision when you graduated chiropractic college in starting 100% chiropractic? What did you view it as at that time versus what it eventually turned into?
I think we always knew we wanted to maybe have multiple locations. We wanted to, what we would call in the chiropractic world, serve at a high level. We wanted to see a good volume of people. It was never I didn't say I want to open a franchise or I want to do this. That was never really what we talked about. We came up with a name and a logo and stuff like that because we knew we didn't want it to be Helfrich Family Chiropractic. We knew we wanted maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 10 locations. Who knew what we were going to do at that time? But we knew really nothing mattered until we built one. And so, we're not going to have people follow our systems or want to be part of our program if we don't build one highly successful practice. And so we felt very confident. I mean, like you said, our business knowledge is probably much more than most people. I graduated at 34. Vanessa was right about 31 or so. So I was, older in the realm of, people had a 5-6 year probably head start when they started. So we had to catch up. And so we jumped right to it. I felt pretty good with the hiring and firing and all kinds of stuff. Chiropractic was new, but at the core, business is business. And you take care of patients and you take care of customers and you solve people's problems, then people want to come back for more. And doing that in a profession where I absolutely loved it, where restaurants I didn't. Like it felt good to serve a hot meal and a cold drink to somebody, but eventually that wears off. It's not life changing. When you change somebody's life and really wake them up to what real health is, and you have that impact on them and their families, it's life changing for both them and you. And so like now I had the business knowledge and just the passion for what I did, and just you couldn't hold me back. I couldn't tell my story to enough people, and eventually that started to replicate and lead to some success in the chiropractic.
So I know what it is today. It's about 250 grand to go to a chiropractic college in most cases. Back then, what was the cost for you and Vanessa to go? And I know you mentioned you sold the restaurant and the house before you moved in. Where was your starting point from a dollars and cents perspective with starting 100% chiropractic? Just to give an idea.
We had, very little money because we had spent all the money to go to school. We took out a decent amount of loans to go through school because we went to school with our oldest, had two more kids while we were in school, Kale and Alec. So by the time we graduated, we had 3 kids under the age of 5, both of us in school. So in addition to tuition and books and whatnot, instead of a little dorm, it was a house because we had 5 of us, and we needed daycare every single day to make that happen and stuff, So we had pretty close to probably 350 in debt, 400,000 in debt or so that we had. We had a house that we had been able to purchase. So we sold that house in Davenport and took what little money we got out of that and, started our life in Colorado Springs, which is where we pretty much grew up for the most part. So not a whole lot. We were broke as a joke, like any young doc that starts, and really any business entrepreneur that starts a business. Very few start with a ton of money on their first one. And so, it was kind of do or die. There was no other option. It was either, like you said, feed my family and do what it takes, or, go work for somebody else and make them rich. So I choose to make myself rich.
And so starting out early in the era of 100% chiropractic, were you one office for a few years or did it blow up pretty quickly? Describe what the early stages or the early years are.
Years, we were one. So we opened 2004, August 9th of 2004, and we opened our second practice early in 2009. So, I think...
And when you opened the second practice, roughly what was the first one doing in terms of just a ballpark revenue to be able to transition to a multi-unit type of business?
We were bringing in somewhere between 85 to 100,000 a month in gross revenue at that point. And so back then the money was back then if I make 6 figures, it was incredible. So, we built
it was meaningful.
Yeah. So we built our dream house and we had a fun car, and, money wasn't an issue. We weren't, doing some crazy things, but at the same time, we had a good life. And so I could have easily been like, you know what, I want to do this. Let's just do it. It's just not how my mind works. It's not how Vanessa works. So I was like, man, how do we replicate this? How do we take over the world? How do we become the number one? So it's a blessing and a curse to always go to think what could be on this whole thing. But it also just drove us, and that excites us still to this day of what can happen and where I think this company can go still. But so we had a solid business, but the ones we open now, we'll probably get to it. They destroy what I did back in the day, and that's what it's all about. Everything's gotten better since then.
And if you put yourself back in that era, did you have people around you that were doing better financially or had bigger businesses? Because in my experience, sometimes you reach, the peak of what your peer group is, and it becomes comfortable and you almost get stuck in that path, so to speak. So when I know it's kind of innate in you that you want more and more or bigger and bigger. But if you think back and you reach that peak of your individual practice, you're making enough money to do whatever you want, essentially, buy the cars, etc. So did you have people around you that pushed you to that next level, or it truly is inside you?
Yeah, that's a super good question, because in our profession, it's rampant. Like a poor money mindset is a disease within chiropractic. One, because people want to serve, and sometimes they don't care if they make money, which is the good side of that. Two is they just don't value what they do at the level where they collect what they have coming to them. One thing that I had three really good friends from chiropractic school that I kept in touch with almost daily, and they practiced. One was in Florida, and one was in Fort Collins, Colorado, and one was in Illinois, I think. And so, every time I thought I did something great, I would call these guys. And a lot of times they'd be like, "Oh, that's not bad." Like, but I did this, and I would lose sleep and like couldn't wait to go, the next day. So it always kept me in check of what's possible. I think that, it's kind of over maybe used cliche in entrepreneurism, but I mean, like when you hang out with a group, if you're the best of your group, right, you're not challenged. And so I always wanted to put myself into groups where I had a reality check. And still today, I'd like to go sit at tables where the conversation is bigger than what I'm having. And so now that the tables are, more in the business world, there's not a lot of people in the chiropractic world that are doing that. But, if people like your father, for instance, like, I mean, they're doing things at such a high level within the profession and thinking things differently than most have ever done it. And so I like to pride ourselves in thinking we challenge ourselves constantly to up the bar of where we can go. That's also the only way the profession grows, is to start to have some people do some things that bring massive success to the profession. And so we're proud to be part of that.
Good. I love it. And so the catalyst to turn into a franchise operation, walk us through that. When did that come about? Did somebody introduce the concept to you? Were you always thinking that path, or how did that come to be versus more privately owned?
2015, we had 22 locations. The attorneys approached us and said, "You're basically a franchise. You need to look at doing this because people at this point are coming in and buying your systems and logo and things like that." So, and things we were doing just fine without it. So we're like, "Oh man, what does that look like?" Not knowing the nuances that they're required to go in, and FTDs and franchise agreements and audited financials and all the fun that goes with it. In hindsight, it was one of the best decisions we ever made because it allowed us to expand and really protect ourselves and our family and the core of the company. But so 2015, we transferred 22 of those offices, actually 21. One chose not to. 22 of those 21 of those practices to franchise, and then began selling the franchises. At that time, to doctors only. 4 years ago, we opened that up to non-doctors as well. And so it's kind of evolved, and we went from one to, it took 5 years to get two. Within the next 6 months, we opened three, and then it was off and running. So then by 2015, we had 22, and now we have 126, I believe, is the count right now.
Gotcha. And so at 2015, when you made that transition, did you take on any capital at that time, or you were just basically running on what you built and whatever came was just gravy on top?
Yeah, we pretty much didn't take on it. The only thing we took on is individual investors to help us fund opening of new practices. And so we didn't need it. We had a successful practice. We had 22 successful practices. And so, but not enough to fund massive growth. So, and of course, banks, when you're like, "I'm a chiropractor, I want to open," they're like, "Come back to us in 4 years. Once you're killing it, we'll think about helping you." It was people I met at the golf course. It was people that I met at restaurants. It was buddies from high school. It was like, so we were hustling family of just like, "Hey, believe in us. Here's amazing returns on an investment. Would you be willing to invest to allow us to open these offices?" And so to this day, we still do majority of private investing because I think it's the best way to do that and provides a great opportunity for people to invest and make some money on the success of the practices as well.
And so some of the early learning curves, obviously you weren't familiar with the franchise concept coming into it. What were some of the growing pains in those early years where you were getting 1, 2, 3 new franchises a year or whatever it was? And what shifted that to where, in business, you almost have everything slow and then it's all at once. So very slow and all at once is a general outcome for big businesses. So what were some of those learning curves for you in building the franchise concept?
Well, I think the biggest thing for building, and before anyone even thinks about franchising or really even expanding, is you have to build the model yourself, and then you have to prove you can reproduce that model. So number 2 is really big. Because number one is Jason and Vanessa are successful chiropractors. There's a lot of successful chiropractors out there. Two was, do our systems also build another successful practice from completely different people if we're not there? So that was in the same town, other side of town. Then we had to do the same state, but in a different town. Then we wanted to do in a different state, completely across the country. And so you start to kind of further your reach out. So I think like anyone, replication of self is super important. And no matter what your business is, whether you have 1 or 5,000, probably 10% of the day or 10% of things going on is going to be a challenge. So the key is adapting to those 10% and then focusing on the good and moving on. It's easy when there's one office, maybe even two, right? That means one of the offices every 10 months or so is going to have a problem. When you have 126, that means any given day, 12 and a half of them are having a challenge, right? And so you need to be able to inspire these people to really move their practice forward. That's what they're paying you to do. And either modify the systems or come to the challenge and do what you need to do. But I think the hardest thing is not being in control. Like, I feel like I could go in and fix anything, but if there's someone in Atlanta, I can't go fix that. I need to do that. And so it's great. It challenges you to really dial it in. But the hardest thing we ever did was to replicate our systems in such a way that someone could take them and run with them. And to this day, it's still tough to find the right people and implement the systems properly.
So as you, I think, know, I started an employment platform called ChiroJobs.com. And one of the things that I've run into, which you just hit on really importantly, is I actively turn offices down that want to bring on associates when I hear that there's really no organization or no systems in place. People just think that, hey, patients are coming in, I have a full schedule, and I need to bring somebody on. But it's not clear how they're going to bring them on, how they're going to train them, what systems are already in place to essentially replicate what they're doing. So I think that's super important, really, with any business, that if you're wanting to expand, organization is one of the most crucial things that I think a lot of people miss, and it's almost impossible to perfect. But when you iterate on it and continue improving, that's where I think a lot of the success comes from, is being able to almost have that cookie cutter approach that you can implement this process, this booklet, this, instruction manual, and anybody with a brain can do it. I forget who told me, actually, one thing that has stuck with me for a long time is I've always had the problem of control too. I don't like giving things away or delegating, because I know I can do it better. But when you have so many things to do at once, which is the priority? And you get lost in that. And someone told me at one point, if you can let go of that and think, if you can have somebody do 70% as good as you and keep doing that, keep bringing people on who can do 70% as good, you're going to wind up with a better operation than what you currently have, even if it's not perfect. So,
no doubt. I mean, you have a limitation of matter of what
exactly.
you do, right? So I think the other challenge that I kind of skipped over too, but in the franchise world, like, for instance, McDonald's, for instance, right? So they basically revolutionized franchises. But it's a very distinct, it's put this patty on this grill for this long, then have this person that stands on this X, put it together, wrap it this way, put it on the window. Healthcare is different. So healthcare can be systemized in the systems, but it needs to be very individualized in the approach to the patient. And so it's not as easy as a chicken wing, where it's like, here's how easy this is. You have different docs making different calls with different techniques, right? And their ability to communicate with people is also extremely relevant in their success. So I think franchising healthcare, I think, is very, very tough, which is why it hasn't been done much. There's some Emergicares now, and a few dentist places have done it. And of course, the Joint and Chiropractic has done a great job of bringing it to the masses. But it's a tougher thing to franchise healthcare because it's such an individual approach and such a personalized relationship between a doctor and a patient that you can't just take widget out, put another widget in, and move on. If you're making burgers, you could, right? The person doesn't care if the burger tastes the same. But in this case, you have to really focus on that approach, and then add to that, chiropractic has a philosophy that's much different than a lot of people live their life. It's much more of above down, inside out, as opposed to mechanistic and just patch this and take this drug and things like that. So there's a lot of nuances in chiropractic that make it such an amazing profession, but also make it very challenging to replicate and differentiate.
So you bring up the joint, and I think that's a really good segue, because the joint, for those who don't know, is the only publicly traded chiropractic business in the clinical sense. So what I'm curious about is, when you reach a certain level of success, you are almost given a menu of options. You say, where do we go from here? And there's the VC route, there's the private equity route, there's the going public, IPO'd route. You went more private equity. So walk us through what that looks like, what the catalyst was, what somebody should be prepared for if they reach that level and are making these decisions. Why private equity? And I'll caveat that before you answer with, when I was growing up, I didn't know anything about finances, anything about capital. Private equity, to me, had always been described as, the selfish people coming in, breaking everything down, firing everybody, loading it up with debt, and selling it as soon as they can at a slight profit. So why is that wrong, and why'd you take that route?
I think you reach, like a lot of things in life, you reach a point where you just know it's time for the next step. And to be honest with you, Vanessa and I would have said we're never going to entertain anyone coming in at any level while we grow this. When you get to over 100 locations, tends to be it's more financial, but at around 100 locations, the numbers then happen where people are like, you know what, that's a proven model. We would like to help you take this big, 10x that or so, if you will. The money and resources required to do that, just what you spend on attorneys, just for contracts, not even to fight battles, but I mean, just to do the day-to-day stuff. And there's a lot of things, the talent you need to bring in, the money you need to spend, the KPIs and data that needs to be kept at such a high level. You just start to realize, like, man, at the end of the day, Vanessa and I are two pretty smart business people that are chiropractors. Right. But we don't know how to run an empire. I don't know how to get to 1,000 offices. I've never done that. Right. And well, you start to have conversations, and to your point, some of the people come across that way. And some of the people, to their credit, will tell you that. Like, hey, who cares? Let's just turn and burn this thing and move on. Well, Vanessa are like, well, that's exactly no. Like, this is a legacy for us. Our kids are going to come in and join this. Like, we actually want to move this profession forward. So this isn't just like a software that we created. Like, I don't give a shit who runs it. Let's move on. Like, this is our baby. And I want to bring equity in to allow us to do the next step of growth, but not at the cost of losing what made us who we are. So there was a big courting process with a lot of different companies. And finally, one really stood out. And they're like, we help founders develop their passion, basically. And they're honest. They may or may not exit in, once we 10 times the office size and things like that where we are right now, or they may want to stay us forever, or we may decide to go public at that time. But it became evident that we needed to take the next step, because in my lifetime, we weren't going to make the impact that I wanted to at the current rate of growth. And you only have so many finances as Jason and Vanessa running the company. So we needed to bring in some of the resources that they had. And, we found a really great group of some people that I really trust and like. And it's been nothing like you had explained, thankfully, but it's been very, very good. And then there's always a getting to know each other. And, the data that PE companies keep is mind-boggling. I consider myself more of a visionary. Vanessa's she's a visionary, but very analytical and understands numbers and all that stuff. I just like to read the numbers. I don't like to create the numbers. And so, there's some getting to know each other a little bit and stuff like that, but it's been wonderful. And I think it's going to allow us and set us up to take the next step, where I don't know if we ever would have achieved that if we just kept on going. It would have been a great life. We could have opened 40 a year and hummed along and been great. I was never going to get to 1,000, 2,000, spread it out of the country, the type of stuff, goals that we have at the rate that we're at.
Got it. And so just doing some back of the napkin math, 100 offices, if we take your early office making roughly 1.2 million just on average in revenue, we're talking probably over 100 million operationally, bringing in that type of revenue, maybe 200. So for those who are not familiar with that size of business, when private equity comes in, Are they buying the whole operation? Are they buying a chunk of it at a certain valuation? How do they value things? Give us an idea of just ballpark those types of figures.
Well, and I wish it was as high as the number you said, but there's a lot of new practices involved in that and stuff that weren't doing 1.2. So not quite that safe of an assumption, but some more than that, right? But I mean, private equity comes in, they look at a couple different things, and it really depends on your industry that you're in. And so there's either they're going to look at EBITDA, and that's what they want to know is what's the bottom line coming out of it, or they'll look at gross and they'll see what's your top line revenue that you can do. And so it kind of depends what industry you're in. And I'm not in PE, I guess by now I'm by default, I'm in it a little bit, but and then they have multipliers. So certain businesses are going to have no multipliers, others all the way up to 20x multipliers. So, when they have their formulas, and I can only pretend to understand the data they do, it's a very long diligence process, 6 months in our case of really going back and forth, a lot of attorney bills, a lot of time on the phone and meetings. But yeah, I mean, they determine essentially of here's what a value is and here's what we'd like to come in for. And, and if that's nowhere near where we want, you say, go pound sand. If it's like, hey, you know what, that's about what we thought too, that's fair. Then you start to go over how's this relationship work. So the next step for Ines and I was like, we remain in control, full control. The staff remains as is, nothing changes. Like if it was that, and they were like, yeah, hell yeah, let's take this to the next step. We love what you've built. Let's support that at a high level and add some analytics and different things like that and take it. And so that was why we chose them. But I'm sure it goes a million different ways. It's probably gone everything from horrendous all the way to, as successful as possible. We're in the early stages of it, but right now it's been a really, really, really good partnership.
And I know we haven't touched on yet, but it's probably a good opportunity to bring up the other supportive businesses you've started, because you've built multiple businesses within the profession, from, EHR, electronic health record system, to I think you have a coaching platform, marketing, supplements, that sort of thing. So where did those additive businesses come from? Was it more out of need, or just you saw the opportunity, or a mixture? And were those businesses also involved in the deal, or was it the core clinics?
Yes and no to a lot of those questions. So yeah, a lot of them were out of necessity. So the EHR, for instance, so Chiro HD is our software. We had fantastic partners that we've teamed up with that are like family to us at this point. And so we created, because as running a franchise and being a doctor and owning a billing company, which is another one that we do, we saw a very big deficiency in the market for what people needed. There were some that were really good to bill, some were really good for the front line, some were really good for the back house, but we wanted one good for everything. So we set out to create a software program with these guys, and they did all the work. We provided a lot of the data and help, but so, I mean, it came out of necessity, but now it's one of the best ones in the profession. A lot of our competitors are using our software program, which is great because it helps them to efficiently run a successful practice and help the profession move forward. Some came out of, we think we can do things better, which is how we always feel, nutrition. We opened the nutrition company because I feel like I could run that better than other people. So, we started to do nutrition. Billing, because I wanted to make sure everything was done with such integrity, and I didn't want to worry and lose sleep at night that someone's doing something wrong that, I don't know well enough yet because they're a new doc or something. So I want to make sure the whole brand is protected. So we started the billing company. So yeah, I mean, all of those have been, Chiro HD's gone through its private equity deal, Series A already. And, it's humming along. The marketing company that we are partnered with is doing fantastic. So I think a lot of it is so we can provide the best services for our franchisees and our franchise. Part of it is because we think we can do it better than most. And part of it as well is like, we're entrepreneurs. We like to create, and that helps us to further our, ability to build the life that we're building.
Yeah, that's awesome. So fast forward to personal finances and where the rubber hits the road. You made the deal. I'm assuming you cashed out a portion of the deal yourself. And so that brings some level of comfort, some level of, holy shit, this is real. This is in the bank account. So Have you always paid attention to your investments or finances, both personally and professionally, or has the majority of your career been focused solely on building the business? How have you balanced those two worlds?
Yeah, I always loved it. I always study that. I mean, I spend every morning, I love to wake up and just watch business news because I like to understand. I mean, to see the markets and what they're doing is one thing. To understand why they're doing that is another thing. And whether it's a political move or something that's happening, I like to understand what's going on in business in general. And that's a great, so I knew enough to be dangerous, I guess, but never huge players in the market, a little bit. Someone early on had really introduced us to life insurance policy, whole life insurance policies, and overfunding those and the tax benefits of that. And so we had a decent amount saved in that, but our investment was in ourselves. So everything kind of went back to us. So when you receive, and we took some chips off the table and then enabled us to really, really build security for the rest of our life. It's amazing to see it at a different level. At that level, honestly, banks come to you. And there are banks that you didn't know exist. And so, like, JP Morgan private, right? So like, oh, I have a private client card. I'm part of that. No, that's Chase client, private client. Usually Morgan private. And so I'll never forget. They're like, well, come down, just like hear us out and stuff like that. We're like, oh yeah, let's shoot, let's go. And they give us an address down on Camelback. And we're like, okay, I know where that is. I don't remember a bank being there, but so you go and they're like, they'll be waiting for you, park in the front, and they'll know who you are. I don't know. How's it?
This was the new spot by the global ambassador.
Yeah. So we went in, a guard came out and said, Dr. Helfrich, park right here, please. Two people met us. They took us up. It's a different level, right? You walk in, there's probably two offices on a floor that's 15,000 square feet. There's a barista that wants to make you coffee. It's just this court. There's a pickleball court. There's all kinds of stuff. But they did a higher level. And so it's just amazing. We've been lucky enough to work with them on a lot of different things. But I mean, how they see it changed our whole process. Planning for taxes is obviously very important at that point, and the trust and things that are involved. So you just do things, you kind of trust it into experts' hands at that point. But it's done at a level that I didn't ever really know existed. So much like PE teaches you analytics that you never knew existed, private banking and stuff also teaches you quite a bit. So, we trust the experts, but still invest back in our own company quite a bit. I do enough of my own just to prove that I think I can beat the experts, but usually they just prove me wrong. So I for the most part, just trust them and let them go nuts.
So when you had the exit and you got that windfall, is there anything, I like to talk about certain vices, cars, wine, travel, etc. You already talked about travel. Is there anything that unlocked that you had a goal to either buy or do or certain things like that early on? Just to give you an idea of where the question comes from, I had always envisioned in my mind, I want to make enough money to fly private, because to me, in my head, it just unlocked such an amazing opportunity to do travel whenever you wanted, however you wanted, without the riffraff of the airport, the TSA lines, etc. Until more recently, I've shifted that a little bit now that I have kids, and I know that private flying increases your likelihood of death by like 300x. But putting that aside, that was my North Star early on. So is there anything like that, and maybe it is flying private, that unlocked for you?
There's a couple. We were successful before that. So I had my dream car, and so stuff like that was already there. We wanted to build a really nice home in Cabo. That's always been a second home for us. So that's in the process of being built, to have that home that, forever for us and our kids and going down there and things. We are fortunate enough to fly private. I love it. We use a company that's very safe. Your stats. But,
it wasn't meant to scare you.
Right, because this is a very tough thing. Almost, this kind of ties back to the kid conversation earlier, full circle. It's very hard for me to show that. Like, I'm not a guy you'll see, like, here's a picture of me getting on my jet, and here's a picture, all that type of stuff. It's not my jet, it's a membership of a jet club, to be clear. But because I feel bad for the people that are going through the struggle of starting a business. And I don't want them to take that the wrong way. I would love for them to see that as, holy shit, that's what's possible. In my mindset back in the day, that's how I would have seen that. I've always celebrated people that were successful because good for them. And someone that kicks my ass now, even when you fly private, right? I'll have my little tiny jet that we're getting on, and right next to you is a jet that costs 10 times more, and that person owns it. And so it's just like it opens up this world of like, there's so much money out there. Like it's unlimited, the money you can tap into. So I like cars. I like watches. I like good wine. I love Cabo. I love Telluride. So I mean, we have some places across the country. We're able to do some really cool shit from the work that we put in. But I don't want that to ever come across as I'm doing that, to show off, because I'm not. I do that because I've worked hard to get that, and I want to provide that same opportunity for every single person that follows our vision and really joins into our company. And that's really my goal, is to do that. And we take a lot of them to see these things in places so they get a taste of that, because they deserve it as well.
Yeah. So you brought up another North Star of mine, multiple homes. That had always also been a dream of mine until I had 2 homes, and it was a nightmare. So do you hire like home management companies that watch over things when you're not there? Or how do you manage multiple properties, or what's the goal, plan, etc.?
The house in Cabo is actually managed by St. Regis. So it's St. Regis private residence. And so, we have a beautiful home that we can use whenever we want. If we want to put it in their rental pool, then we can make money on it and rent it out and stuff. But they maintain it and keep it gorgeous and do all the things, and you pay to get it done. But for that reason, I don't want someone to say, hey, there's a hurricane in Cabo.
Yeah. I'll sort up your windows. Yeah.
So yeah, they take care of that.
Good. And so with going back to investments real quick, are you of the mindset that you put money mostly in the S&P 500 or some safe investment vehicle, just let that grow? Or are you more on the gambling side of things where you say, I want $10 million of NVIDIA stock today because I know it's going to 10x? Just
a couple of years ago. I think we're a little bit of both. I think we're at a point, I'm 53. And so for the first time in my life, I start to think like, okay, there's a certain portion that wants to be safe with this, really start to build, but there's a certain part of me that's nowhere near where I want to be. And so, I think that I work harder now than I ever have. I work more now than I ever have. And so because I love it and I see the impact we can make, I also see a way to win this game and build something that's really special for forever, to pass on to our kids and the profession and everything that's important to us. So, I think we have a little bit that we set aside for like, hey, let's go nuts and try something risky on this. I would rather support a young entrepreneur or something and take a risk on somebody than I would a crazy stock that I know nothing about. Significant amount, and that kind of goes back to JP Morgan private. Like they'll take it and say, hey, we can pretty much guarantee you, 5.5 to 7.5% interest on your money going forward. And so there's some safety in that where that's not going anywhere for sure.
Yeah. And so you mentioned winning. What does winning look like? Is there an end point, or is it more the journey of constant progression?
It's a good question. I think that, on a superficial level, winning to me is being number one in the profession. And we have a long way to go to pass the number one.
Is that number of clinics, revenue, a combination?
Yeah, both. But number of clinics is what I see. Revenue would happen much, much faster. But I think that number of clinics, mainly because I want to make that big of an impact in this profession. It all goes back to where I love this profession at a level that it's so misunderstood and just has never been giving the chance it has and the impact that it makes in people's lives. So I want people to know that more. So, I think, ultimately winning is having health. It's being with your family. It's enjoying life every single day. So never at the cost of that do I want to do anything. But with us together, having the blessing of working with my wife and some of my best friends and my kids, I think we can accomplish some cool shit together. There's some superficial goals. I'd like to fly on that plane. I'd like to go to this place, things like that. That's just enough to keep me going. But all in all, money attracts money for a lot of reasons. But people that know that it's just unlimited out there. And I think every person you talk to that's 1,000 times, whether it's Elon Musk, someone that's even at a level I can't fathom, or just, someone that's at my level, they're all going to say some of the similar things, which is you translate your passion, right? And do what you love, and you find a way to communicate that and solve problems for people. And there's an unlimited amount of money out there. Every time I go somewhere, I'm reminded of it. If I go to Telluride and we're driving up to our place, that's a $20 million house, 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. And these are all people, some of them don't go there more than a month a year. It's just a house they wanted to have in the mountains, right? And every resort place is that way. Cabo is certainly that way, but so too are a million different places. So you start to realize, like, I need to play at a level where I want to have that for myself and my family because we deserve it. And so many people don't think they deserve it. They think that's for people that are evil and doing bad things to make that money and unethical. It's pre-programmed headspace that they had for a long time of wealth has to equate to you're doing shitty things to get there. And it's just not true. Vanessa and I are doing really good things to get there. And the more we make, the more good shit we do with it.
3 final questions for you. You ready? Favorite dream car that you've not yet owned that you would hope to own one day?
If I'm going crazy, I'd say a Bugatti Veyron.
Okay.
Yeah.
Best bottle of wine you've drank this year?
A 2018 Harlan.
Okay. I love it. Last but not least, favorite restaurant you've ever eaten at?
God, there's so many great ones. One I love all the time, and then we go back all the time, is SW Steakhouse in Vegas. I love the ambiance. The food is incredible. The wine list. I love Vegas. I think it's a blast to people watch and hang out. So I think SW is something I correlate a really fun time with all the time.
Love it. I appreciate you taking the time, Doc. Love you. Love your family. Love what you're doing for the profession and for business. And for anyone who listens, I hope they take your journey as inspiring, like you said, and try to reach the goals that you're going to continue to reach. So thank you.
I appreciate it, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity.